All right, welcome to our Chapter 11 discussion for project management, where we are talking about risk management. So, all projects face a certain amount of risk, and as a project manager, you have to be able to anticipate these risks and have a plan for dealing with them. So, how do you go about doing that? Well, the first thing you need to do is identify potential risks and how they potentially threaten the success of the project. And so I suppose if we are to start at square one, we need to look at how do we define the success of a project? What does it mean for a particular project to be successful? And then once we understand our success criteria, we can then think of things that could potentially threaten that success. So the management plan has to come up with basically a plan to achieve project success and avoid risks that would potentially threaten that success. So as I said, we have to first of all identify how are we going to measure success of a project. The first way to measure a successful project is, have we stayed under budget? Have we stayed on schedule? Have all the specifications been met? If you're meeting all of those criteria, that is one way you can measure the success of the project. Another way is, have we met the needs of the customer? So you could potentially design an awesome product, but if it's really not what the customer wanted, then you really haven't succeeded in your project. So you need to make sure that the deliverable does comply with what the customer originally wanted. Another way to look at a successful project is if the project is an internal project, if you're doing something within your company or organization to potentially develop a new process or realign a new strategy or something along those lines. Does it then, in the end, help the overall organization? Was the project successful in terms of, is it making the company more money? Is it making the company more streamlined, more efficient? Does it improve the company's market share? Things like that are ways to determine, was the project successful. And then internally, looking at the project team, the process of working on a project can be successful if the team members have gained experience, if they feel good about what they've done, if they've built positive relationships with other team members. So in a way, the project is a learning activity for those team members. And if the team members have developed professionally and personally, and they feel job satisfaction and a sense of pride in the work that was done, then that's a success criteria as well. So if we're going to start looking at potential risks and making a plan with how to deal with them, there are lots of potential risks, and sometimes decisions need to be made on what risks are acceptable and which ones we really need to pay a lot of attention to. And the way we can prioritize risk and different success criteria of a project would be to go to the stakeholders and evaluate what their needs are, what they see as being necessary for the success of a project. So you would go back to your stakeholder register that you developed earlier in the project and take that into consideration. Some stakeholders are going to have more influence over a project, And so the more important stakeholders, obviously their opinions are potentially going to carry more weight when it comes to prioritizing different aspects of the project, and therefore being a little bit more vigilant when it comes to risks to those particular aspects. So you need to essentially understand what the people involved need. What is it that they need, and how can you best protect that to ensure project success? So generally speaking, risk is anything that may impact the team's ability to achieve success measures. And risks can come in one of two ways. There can be threats, which is a risk that has a negative impact on the project. But there are also risks that are positive. They're opportunities. It's a chance that you can take. It may or may not be successful, but if it is successful, can have a very positive impact on the project or the organization performing the project. So, what comes to my mind would be potentially a risky investment opportunity. It may not be successful, but if it is successful, you can increase your investment. You can make a lot of money. So those types of opportunities are things where it might be worth taking a chance based on the potential positive outcome. So a project manager needs to develop a project management plan. And a plan is going to have various parts to it, and needs to outline several different things. The risks need to be identified and prioritized. So, as I said, the prioritization can come from the opinions of the stakeholders, and then these risks need to be monitored to evaluate their likelihood of occurring. And there needs to be a plan in place. If the risks do present themselves, how are you going to deal with it? How are you going to avoid it or minimize it? And then you have to have a plan for actually performing the response to the risk. So it's all well and good to have a plan in place, but unless that plan gets effectively executed, it really won't help with avoiding or minimizing the risks. So when it comes to determining what the risks are facing a project, it really helps to have a variety of opinions. No one person can think of all the potential risks associated with the project. So the more people you get thinking about it, the more people you get brainstorming, the more potential risks can be uncovered. So it really helps to have meetings with a variety of stakeholders, and get all of their opinions, and it may uncover some things that you would not have thought of yourself. Also, anytime you're able to get more people to participate, they tend to buy in to the idea more, rather than having some type of risk plan thrust upon them. If people feel like they were a part of creating it, then they feel like they own it a little bit more and are a little bit more willing to participate. Another thing is, even though you may have a lot of people working together to identify risks, you want to make sure that the responsibility for dealing with that risk is assigned to just one person. And it's important not to assign it to multiple people, because when you assign a task to multiple people, then you have the potential issue of finger pointing and people saying, well, it wasn't my fault. This other person was supposed to deal with it. So you want to make sure that you have a clear individual assigned to each risk, and only one person is assigned to each risk. So if you come up with a lot of ideas for risks, it can be a bit of a mess unless you organize all of these risks. So you want to think of as many potential risks as possible, but you may not be able to deal with all of them. You may only have the resources to deal with the most important risks, and so it's important to organize them so that you can identify which are the more important risks and which ones perhaps can be overlooked, or at least the resources put towards them could be minimized. So there are multiple ways you can do this. You can organize them by the stage of the project lifecycle. So there are certain risks that may occur early in the design phase, or in the planning phase, or in the execution phase. So those are different ways you can group them by when they occur throughout the project. You can categorize risks by looking at what specific objectives or success criteria they impact. You can organize risks as external versus internal, and you can also organize them according to their level of uncertainty. So those levels of uncertainty can be broken down into known knowns. These would be risks that can be somewhat easily predicted. You know what they're going to be, you know their likelihood of occurring, you know their potential impact, and you would hopefully therefore have an established plan to deal with it. So known knowns are risks that don't pose as much of a threat because of our familiarity with them. Known unknowns would be the next step up. These are risks that we can identify, but we may not know their likelihood of occurring. These are things that may happen, they may not. So it's a little bit more difficult to know how many of your resources to apply to it if you're uncertain of how likely it is to occur. And then we have unknown unknowns, things that are truly unpredictable, things that nobody could have seen coming. And so these are the hardest to deal with. You can set aside contingencies of time or budget to deal with them when they occur, but other than that, you really don't have any way of knowing what they're going to be. So how can you really have a plan of dealing with them other than setting aside some resources, some money, some time in the schedule, and hope that the contingency you've set aside will be enough? So when it comes to identifying risks, we need to gather as much information about those risks as we can, review the information, and then understand the relationship, how one risk might trigger another, and that might trigger another. So the potential cause and effect relationships between these different risks are important to understand. And when we've gathered up all that information, we want to document it and keep track of it in a document we're going to call the risk register. So I think I'm going to stop right here. I just hit the 14-minute mark on my recording, and I'm limited to 15-minute videos. So I'll resume this discussion in the next video.